Oh,
So I'd like to call the meeting to order. This meeting is being held pursuant to and in compliance with emergency ordinance number 20-A16. An emergency ordinance to ensure the continuity of government during the COVID-19 disaster. The committee members who are electronically present at this meeting are Betsy Baton, Neil Means, Paula Paganakis, Dottie Martin, Linda White, and myself. Who did I miss? No one. Okay. County staff in attendance for this meeting: Carolyn Schaffer and Tori Karanopoulos. Kanelopoulos.
get those Greek names right.
Yeah, I'm sorry. President, the person responsible for receiving public comment for the Village Rivanna Community Advisory Committee. The opportunities for public to access and participate in electronic meeting are posted on the Albemarle County calendar. First order of business will be to adopt the meeting minutes of our last meeting. I will ask you, have you all, anyone who has not received or reviewed the meeting minutes? Raise your hand if you have not.
Neil, I sent them to you back in August.
I thought the last meeting was the joint meeting we had in September, or whenever it was, October.
Well, I'm only referring to the last meeting we took meeting, our last meeting.
Oh, okay.
We took minutes on.
I've seen those.
You've seen those, okay. If you've all reviewed them, I need a motion to approve the minutes. Raise your hand.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Nobody opposing, the minutes are approved. First order of business will be discussion of the recent Breezy Hill zoning application and the results. And I would like to hear your thoughts and the comments. I'm also looking for things we could do in the future. In addition to review, we all know how it turned out and we may be disappointed, but what are lessons learned? Are there any lessons learned from this? Anyone?
I just want to state that I appreciate Donna's listening to, I believe she listened to my voice because I think I saw some things in her comments on that. And I appreciated that she did listen and carry those as she made her decision, her own decision.
Okay. Anyone else?
Me.
Betsy?
I wanted to tell Donna how much I appreciated her support. Even though we didn't carry the day, that she was on our side, I thought was very important.
Absolutely. Agreed.
Neil?
I had a couple points. We were congratulating ourselves that it could have been worse. It could have been 160 units. I look back and their original application back in July of 2019 or something was for 200 units on like 84 acres or 85 acres or whatever it was. And, it got reduced before it got to the Board of Supervisors the first time. But it just goes to show you that the developers really don't care about the master plan at all. I mean, and the arguments they made much later about, oh, it should be gross acre, 1 unit per gross acre, not net, is just an argument. It's like they're going to try to get as much as they can anytime they want, and no matter what the master plan says. And the problem with it is, it's not just the developers who think that. It's on the current board. It's at least half the current board of supervisors who seem to think the same way, that it's a development area, so put as much density in there as you can, and they don't take the master plan seriously. And then another point I had is that I think it seems to me, a couple of times over, several times over the couple of years this thing was going through meetings, planning commissioners or supervisors would ask, what's the by right? How many by right division rights do they have by right? And I think, early on when it was 84 acres or something, Megan did have an answer that it was like 26 or something.
24.
Like that.
Yeah.
But several of the times that people asked, the staff did not have an answer, And I think that routinely the staff should calculate those division rights and have the answer ready. Because it seemed to me that some planning commissioners and some supervisors didn't seem to really understand the distinction. It seemed to me they were maybe confusing division rights with what the master plan said would be appropriate. That they seemed to get the two confused, where it was like 60 something according to the master plan, and it was, I guess, 20 something division rights, which would not be spread evenly over the whole parcel. So, I mean, I think to me, it shows there's a lot. I don't think the the county's master planning process is functioning well. I think it's dysfunctional and it needs to be revisited.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I still have grave concerns for the property that is left,
Me too, Paula.
because that appears to be what is defined as a buffer
Mhm.
transition area. And so I have grave concerns over what will happen with that next, because obviously the developers have a scheme up their sleeve, in my opinion. It seems obvious. So I have grave concerns about that. We have promised a buffer and a transition zone between the development and the rural fringe. And I'm concerned about that happening. I was also disappointed that I thought it was a slap in the face. I took it as a slap in the face when the developer said, well, he can't provide any proffers because he won't get enough profit out of the project. And I don't know how much impact that had on the vote of the supervisors, but I felt a bit insulted by that. And then also that the supervisors didn't, anywhere I saw, they probably did somewhere, but I didn't see comment about why they were let go without any kind of proffers that were offered.
Any other comments?
I'd like to ask Donna to comment on that.
Let's make our comments and then.
Oh, okay, fine. Sorry.
Any other comments? Okay, I have some comments I'd like to make. These are observations. Remember that first, when we opposed this, none of us except Linda, I think, were on the board. We're on the committee. We did this ad hoc as a group of individuals. And so we had a lot of freedom to organize, to get petitions, to get flyers and do things like that. We then, after the first 2 or 3, if you will, applications were put to rest temporarily, we then got on the committee. One thing that, and I got it back on the committee because I'm concerned about improving the master plan.
Me too.
And one thing strikes me that was not in our favor during this application. We can say that the supervisors were not familiar with the master plan. And to an extent, that's probably true. But our master plan, as written now, has inconsistencies in it and has vagueness written into it. I'll give you some examples. Charlie Armstrong pointed out as an example to show that gross density was stated in the master plan instead of net density, pointed out that it said at one point 1 unit per acre, and it showed 110 units, 110 acres, if y'all remember that. That's in a table. It wasn't pointed out that that was merely illustrative for the sake of showing what 1 unit per acre meant. We have no other language in the master plan that says 1 unit per acre. Net, we don't say that. The land use plans indicate 1 unit per acre. When you, in certain applications, when you take out the area that cannot be developed. But we don't say it in the verbiage. So that was one fault. We also have several contradictions with regard to different areas in zoning. The other thing is, that I like to say is, there are things in the master plan which were negative in addition to transportation. But the initial reaction we got and the vast majority of the letters that were submitted were talking about transportation. We have very strong language in there. But we said in there is essential that no new development be approved until all the projects that are in the master plan be done. And that was a problem because we stated it in terms of doing specific projects instead of stating it in terms of what conditions should arise. In other words, instead of saying we should not consider any development until Route 250 is a Class C road instead of a Class F road, it would have been much more effective than saying you have to have this, 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 and this project. Because some of the comments from the supervisors were, well, this project's impractical and this one's never going to be done, so it doesn't mean anything. We were pinning it on the completion of specific projects. I'm aware of the fact that much of that information was given to us by staff when we wrote the original master plan. And we were inexperienced, but we're not inexperienced now, we know more. So this is something we have to consider when we talk about future master planning.
Could I comment on that?
Sure.
My recollection is that it was David. I remember David Benish telling us you'd be better off being specific, putting specific things in than saying, the road needs to be adequate or something, because, they just say, okay, we timed some lights and, extended a shoulder over here and a turn lane there, and it's improved, we're done, I assume that's what he meant, and so we put in the specific things which VDOT and the county had actually specified as what needed to be done, So I don't know whether if we had said Class C, I don't think it would have held up any better.
I think it would have, because that's specific and that's what was VDOT, that's based on the VDOT rating of the road.
Yeah, but they're going to say, we don't use those ratings anymore. Now we're using something else, The
problem with the projects, Neil, is that just because you put in a project that's on the list, there's no guarantee it's ever going to be done. It's a wish list, and it isn't decided by the county, it's decided by the state.
Right, but that's
on all the applications they get, there's so much money. So the problem is, you put it as one of your 40 projects in the county, but 40 projects aren't done. And so someone who is not inclined to agree with the master plan can seize on that. When you say, for example, that the road should be a Class C road based on VDOT's analysis, you're saying something specific. You're saying a condition. We're objecting to a condition. We were not objecting or saying this, and this had to be done in order to approve something. It's a difference. It's a condition that people are complaining about. The road's overburdened. We don't want the road to be overburdened. When you get to the point the road's not overburdened, we'll consider and we should think about future development. But you can be held up because some specific project is not going to be done, just not going to be done. And I respect your point of view. This is my point of view. Another thing was that before we were a committee, and I was sending out letters to people, pleased to people to write letters, it became very apparent to me that many people simply had not read the master plan. They were not really aware of the issues. They only knew about transportation. And so people were sending me emails asking me to give them lists, talking points, so they could write their letters. And that started overburdening me. I mean, I just was getting swamped with these things. But we did it. We got a lot of letters. Because of that, when we went to the last most recent application, I got the bright idea, instead of being swamped again or having the same request come into me, that I would write a letter centering on the main remaining issue, which was net density versus gross density. And I would write the letter and then solicit for approval from residents and have signatures. And so we got 473 signatures. Everyone approved. They had to give me an approval before I put their name on there. But I really don't think that was effective, as it would have been if people sent in individual letters.
I
I
agree.
tend to think that means more.
Donna, which one would have impressed you more?
I mean, they're only reading one letter, and they're not going to read everybody's signatures. They're seeing a lot of signatures, as opposed to getting 473 letters. So I think I made a mistake there in order to ease things for myself. It didn't appear as much of a grassroots movement as it did the first couple of times. But that brings up another point, which is going to be discussed later in our meeting. And that's, how do we get residents to become more educated, more knowledgeable, and participate more in their master plan and in their community? And that's always something that every community faces. People have their own lives, they have their own things, they have their own schedules, and they tend not to do these things. We have to get people, this be our task, to get people to become much more interested and much more watchful over what's happening in our community. So those are basically my comments. Are there any other comments before we go on? Okay. Let's discuss future master plan review.
Dennis, did you want me, I'm sorry to interrupt. Did you
I'm
want-
sorry, Donna. Yes, you give your answer.
Okay, thanks. First off, with regard to communications, I'll acknowledge that, it's kind of like if you get your AARP magazine and there's a postcard in there. If 1,000 people just sign a postcard and mail it in, numerically you see that, but those individually do not have the same impact of 1,000 individually written messages.
Right.
Having said that, as I think you all know, I try to respond to every individual who communicates with me who lives in the Scottsville district. So I would say in one respect, I prefer getting one letter with 498 signatures on it rather than 498 emails, simply because of the time it takes. And I do reach one, even if we get very close to the hearings, I may run out of time to respond. And I try to tailor individually each response to the communication that I receive, because I do want people to know that I've actually read your communication. So for me, it's not exactly 6 of one, half a dozen of another, or as my German friend would say, 6 of a dozen, half of another. But I actually like getting both, because that allows me to see kind of the total pulse of the community, but also in a way that allows me to be able to respond more broadly. And I do appreciate, I think Linda and Dennis, both of you, maybe others as well, when I wrote my general communication after the fact, that you shared that with the community. And that, as long as we know that we are communicating, we're reading, we're listening, then at least we're getting that message across. In terms of the total outcome, I'm going to use a little bit of a military comparison here between strategy and tactics. Tactically, I see that there were four, I don't want to use the word battles because I don't want it to sound like a war. There were 4 points where this process was coming up. And Neil, I think you're the one who mentioned earlier, it started at 200 to 160 to 130 to finally what was approved at, I think 78 or something like that. So tactically, I think we won the first 3 from 200 to 160 to 130. And while tactically the final decision may not have achieved everything that was desired, strategically, I believe that we can actually look at this with a pretty high measure of satisfaction, because as I looked at the whole Village of Rivanna concept, and I like to use the bell curve, the core of the Village of Rivanna should be the densest development. And as we move out to between the Village of Rivanna and Carroll Creek, which of course was not part of the discussion, but then Carroll Creek to Running Deer, which was Breezy Hill, then Running Deer, and then the Limestone Farm, I think we were able to achieve that bell curve where the development is much lesser as we come out. Now, you know, did we achieve everything? No, but we came out, I think, a whole lot better strategically than if it had been at 160 or 130.
I would agree.
I try to look for where we have achieved some successes, and I have applied this same philosophy through all of the development areas. You know, we just have done the Crozet master plan, and I was one of the supervisors who supported including the middle density concept, which I think makes sense in our development areas. We had RST, I think was the project up on 29 North, which was pretty highly dense, but it's also right on a 6-lane highway up there. So I've tried to maintain a consistency of, as you get to the periphery of development areas, it should be less developed. And as you move more towards the center, it should be more highly developed, more dense. And in terms of, you know, the developer's comment about, well, I can't do the proffers because I can't make enough profit out of it. That's the reality of a capitalist system. I mean, the developers are there to make money. They're not there necessarily or even marginally to be concerned with the overall concept of our comprehensive plan. They may have to live within it or within zoning, but their purpose is to make money. And so it's you as community members, the planning commission and us on the board, we then have the responsibility to tone that down to be more consistent with our plan. I do want to add one other thing. I've been reading a lot of articles lately about the housing shortage that the country is facing, and it is substantial. And the reports that I am seeing are that it is going to be many years before capacity meets demand. So we are going to continue to have pressures to build more housing. And part of it is the economics, you know, the more that's developed, then the lower the price can be. So again, I mention all of these things because while the ultimate outcome may not have been everything that we wanted, and when I say we, I appreciate those comments because I really did try to support what the local community, you know, desires were. But I think overall, we were pretty successful in keeping the density as low as it was. And again, it may not have been everything we wanted, but it was much lower clearly than where they started out.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
So let's talk about the future master plan. I expect, well, let me ask Tori. Tori, do you think our master plan will come up for review in 2022? Or is the effort going to be on the comprehensive plan?
So I'm not sure when this master plan will be up for review. It would need to be on the community development work program. And we do have the comprehensive plan update that just started. And so that will take up a pretty significant amount of resources while that project's going on.
Okay. So the answer is you're not sure. We don't know. Okay. What I'm suggesting to our group, our committee, is we start putting our thoughts together as a committee way before this comes up. And let me ask the question first. Is there anyone on the committee who does not have a copy of the 2015 master plan?
I don't. Because when I went off the committee, I gave mine to Ann Harrods and she was on the committee. Not knowing I was going to come back on the committee. So I don't have a copy, but I know it's online.
Yeah, you can get it online and you can print it out if you wish from that.
All 52 pages, yes, I think.
Why not?
No.
Paper.
Maybe I'll ask Ann for mine back.
Does everyone else, and everyone else I assume has a copy?
Yes.
So what I'd like you to do is start going, and it's going to be a while, so just take a look at your different sections of the master plan. Really read them. And if you think there's anything in there that can be approved or updated because time has passed, please make a note of it with the page and with your comments. And then there's another way to do this, and I want to ask your opinion of this. I can assign each of you a section of the master plan to look at. And then you could really go over that part and give the group, after we finally get to it, your comments on what should be changed. Do you think it would be better to do it that way or to do it where you each go over the master plan and pick the things that you're really interested in and comment on them?
After sending around the draft of the newsletter that we're going to talk about later and share, and the mistakes that weren't caught by a couple of us putting it together, I think that we all should look at everything.
I agree. And we all need to know what the thing says anyway, the whole thing.
Any other comments, Neil?
Probably better to go through the whole thing.
Okay,
Individually.
all right. No one disagrees? So I suggest you do that. When we have our next meeting, I'm going to ask you if there's any progress. It'll depend on whether we get word about when our master plan will come up. Now, community education. I touched before on the fact that a lot of the residents, most of the residents are not familiar with the master plan and not familiar with, in fact, many of them don't even have an interest in it. They have an interest in not getting more traffic. And some cases that it goes as far as that. It's a daunting effort to get community interest and community support of a master plan and get people knowledgeable of it. And what we're going to attempt to do with your approval and your suggestions is start a community education program. I have a mailing list right now of about close to 500 people. And that includes Running Deer, it includes properties in between Running Deer and Glenmore, includes Glenmore, it does not include Rivanna Village. I'm having a really rough time getting through to Havana Village and getting emails. I've tried Tim, can't remember his last name.
Culpepper.
Yeah, and he never answered my emails. He doesn't answer.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether they just want to keep it secret or what, but they're not involved. So we have this mailing list. I think I'm limited in Google, and I have this mailing list on Google. I think I'm limited to 500 emails at a time. I'm not sure. I have to check that, but I'm very close to that number. I may have to have another list developed. The other problem I have is that I don't know how to transfer the list I have, for example, to Paula and Dottie if they were going to send out something. So they'd have to send it to me on a link, and then I have to close the link in my letter to the residents. If anyone knows how to do that after the meeting, you get hold of me and we can figure out a way to do it. In any event, Paula and Dottie have prepared initial correspondence that would start this off to the residents. You've all received copies of it this afternoon. I hope you've opened up your copies and read it. Tori, were you able, did you get my email and were able to get?
I can share it. Do you want me to bring it up now?
Okay, you can do it. Okay, great.
Try once again. Is it up?
No,
Okay, I'll try again. Here it is.
there we go.
Oh,
Nice.
okay.
Unfortunately, I'll have to move it, and maybe somebody of the muted people. I don't believe you've received it, so maybe some of you can tell me when to move it to the next page.
Okay, why don't you go ahead?
Oh, okay. So Dottie and I met and kind of laid out a plan for on rolling out some newsletters and some things we talked about. And Dottie, by all means, jump in if I'm missing something or you have something else you want to add. You know, we discussed how just what Dennis just said, people aren't all that involved unless it really affects them personally. That's the first motivational feature that inspires someone to react or pay more attention. So we have to keep in mind that most of the audience that we're addressing don't have a lot of information. So you see, Dottie kind of came up with a fun little questionnaire here, and we decided to put a map of the development area because most people don't even know they're in a development area, let alone what it is. And people don't understand the difference between the village of Rivanna and Havana Village. And so that's why we started off with a fun little thing there and a map, because, you know, if people are looking quickly and they don't have a lot of time in their day, they just kind of, you know, the map's a good idea. So we talked about things that maybe make people concerned about their own property or what's going on across the street or next door. We know they're concerned about Route 250. We know they're concerned about you know, density and cramming things in and losing the beautiful pastoral aspect of living in the outskirts in a county, in a rural area. So we're introducing this as a first in a series. We gave the history of the village of Rivanna and made the difference between the village of Rivanna and Havana Village. We talk about just basics here, and this hasn't gone out. This is a draft. Government oversight. We want things to be very easy. So you see back here, oh no, not yet. Okay, down here, you're going to see a lot of places where they can click and go immediately to get the answer to a question or to get more information about what we're talking about here. So we talk about the Community Advisory Committee here and how there's one for each of the growth areas. I was thinking of putting everybody's email address in there, but I don't know that we're the individual ones that should be contacted. But if someone will want to, if they're reading this and they say, hey, oh yeah, I heard Dottie talk about that, or Neil was talking about that the other day. And they decide, I want to know more. Maybe I want to be on this committee. Well, let's give them the opportunity right there and make sure they can click through to do that. As we're talking about the master plan, you know, we put the initials because we refer to these things, the MP and the VOR, CAC and all these things. So we'll continue to keep putting the definitions and repeating so that people can understand. There's one thing I can't stand is to have an acronym and have no flying clue what it means. So, you know, we'll put that in. Obviously, there's a link here to go to the master plan. We introduced Donna Price. A lot of people have no idea who their supervisor is, and Rick Randolph. They don't even know that we have a planning commissioner, let alone who he is. So, you know, how can you get in touch with those? You can click right there and ask your questions, make your comments. We talk about the recent development decision and give the results of that. There are a lot of people who, you know, 400 and some, almost 500 people we know were following it. And so if they didn't see the conclusion, this will give them the conclusion. And then a little bit of a reason to stay connected with a word of warning of what's yet to come, what possibly could come, and more things that maybe they would like some information on. And then, of course, the opportunity to click and pass it on to someone else and sign up for the list. This one was written, it was edited recently because of the Breezy Hill decision, but it was written a few months ago. And when Donnie and I were talking about it, we want to have a little bit of, I don't want to say fear factor, but I can't really think of another word. You know, this a word of warning kind of makes them say, well, I want to look at the next one that's coming because, you know, what is going on with all this land that's still able to be developed. And we have a new planning director and what are his ideas and what is the missing middle? So we're hoping to provide questions in people's minds to look for the next one. I think some of the questions I have is one, you know, this is the first one. I think it's timely for now to go out. How often? And then the end goal, as Dennis presented, is that we want to engage people enough that they ask questions about the master plan, that they're more informed about the master plan. We can go through the master plan, bring up points in the master plan as part of the newsletters to raise questions. We're trying to engage the community. So we want them to ask questions. I didn't have a chance to pop over. I was trying to figure out how to connect on Nextdoor Glenmore. It popped up on my screen that there are actually people out there right now that are chattering about there's a meeting tonight and I can't find the link that we were provided to get on. So there are actually people out there talking about it on Nextdoor Glenmore. They want to be here at this meeting. So we want to make sure we're putting that in here and possibly, you know, a link to maybe we put these newsletters out right before the meetings and then include the Zoom link so that people can attend these meetings and hear firsthand what we're talking about. We want them to communicate with us. Dottie, you have anything to add?
No, I think you pretty much covered it. I don't know what the timing should be for sending this out, if we should do it now or wait or whatever. But I think the next one should be what our master plan has done for you. And we can start with the village of Rivanna. Start with Havana Village, sorry. Havana Village. And Havana Village started out as, I think, 700 home sites. And they're going to build 260. And a lot of that had to do with the input of this committee. There were other factors, but that was a big part of it. Breezy Hill started at 180, they're down to 80. And all those things happened because of this committee. And being aware, being tuned in, sharing with people, and fighting them. So I think that should be sort of another topic for the second or the next email. What is it
too? And we put in here this was an edit that just took place recently when we had to change because this was initially written before Breezy Hill was approved. So it's been changed after it was approved. And this part here, many of you have made your questions and objections known to the supervisors, and you have made a difference. We want to keep encouraging people that they have made a difference. And what you're saying would actually, you know, do that very well because it would show the numbers of what participating in your government and providing opportunities, not like us who are all immersed in it now again, but and have been in between when we weren't on the board. in between the first session and this period of time that all of us are on. But there's a lot of people out there that are going to pick and choose little things that are of interest to them. And we want to make sure we're providing them with every opportunity to become engaged, whether it's one comment to one of us or to Rick or Donna or staff or whomever is appropriate, or whether they want to jump on board and get in up to their necks.
I'd like to have comments from everyone that's on the committee. I need full participation in this because this is important. You can be positive or negative, I don't care. I just need your comments.
Well, I think that it would be helpful to supply a definition of missing middle. Because
That's going to be the next presentation.
Right.
Yeah.
That's kind of like the hook to read the next one.
We're going to have a presentation on that, Betsy. It's on the
Be the
agenda.
next issue of the newsletter or
Yep.
the future.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
Um,
No taken.
Go on, Neil.
I don't put my email address on here for everyone in the world to, put spam out to me.
Exactly.
I think it's good. Maybe it should say that, not so much that it says something about we're now doing the master plan, or, maybe it should say something like soon it will be doing the master plan or something.
Right. Yeah, this is a draft. So you're right. And maybe when ever we find out some idea of when it might be happening, we can zoom in on that.
Yeah.
And maybe we start out now kind of with what Dottie says. This is what your master plan has done for you, and then just keep rolling out. And this is what's in it, so that people are educated by the time we say, hey, now it's time to redo it. Maybe we've already presented a good portion of the major points and have hooked some people to help.
Linda?
I think it's really good. It's short and to the point. I think enough that people will read it. If you get a big long email, it's like, forget it, you just delete.
Definitely.
Yeah, little bites.
Yeah, little
written.
bites. And I think the plan that you're talking about for the next couple of issues is really good.
In future issues, should we have a section where people can ask questions of the committee or of their supervisor or of their planning commissioner? Because asking questions clears up misunderstandings.
Yes.
We can't cover everything.
If we had a post your question here, we can, when we receive the questions, we can sort them out to the appropriate answerer, whether that be
Well, we could
supervisor.
have an email, which is an email address, which is generic, and have questions posted to that, and then have that forwarded to each committee member. Or to our supervisor, just something that wouldn't be a individual's email address.
Right. Oh, right. Like this, click here, you don't find, well, I guess if you hover it over, you can see what it is.
Can we do like vorcac@gmail.com?
Yeah. Well, this one here to apply, oh, there it is. Yeah, if you
Yeah.
hover, it does come up every time. You just have to be slow about it.
Have you thought beyond the second issue, Paul? You and Dottie?
We kind of had a tentative plan, but we definitely want to visit that again, because it's been 3-4 months now. 3 months, I guess. 4 months.
I think maybe after Tori's presentation, we may want to have a future issue explaining what middle density is.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Because, my feeling is a lot of people, particularly in what we've read about Crozet, and it might be their individual situation, came out against it right away. And I'm of the belief before I come out for or against anything, I'd like to understand it, which is why we're having a presentation tonight, and then we can decide. It's something that's in the news, and maybe we want to use this instrument as a way of acquainting people more with it. Or maybe want to have an issue on running gear, explain when running gear started, how many people live there. Part of it's in the rural community, part of it's in the development area.
Right.
You know, we may want to
I can
talk
help with
about-
that.
talk about the history of Havana Village, talk about the history of Glenmore, just so it's not simply a master planning acquaintanceship. It's understanding your community, get people more aware of it.
Good
I'm trying
idea.
to get the share function off and I'm not seeing where I normally find it. Can someone
Oh,
help me? I can't get out.
no.
It's not at the bottom anymore. It's not at the top.
We need Carolyn or Tori to help you. I don't know.
Maybe they can just take it away from me and it'll disappear.
Oh, I went down to the bottom, I says share screen, so it doesn't tell you not.
Well, it did. That's how I got in, but it's not popping up now to get out. Usually when I do mediations, it's at the top and it says stop sharing and I'm not seeing that either. And
Oh.
thank you, whoever did that.
Okay.
I have two
Well, thank
questions.
you. Go ahead, Tom.
When do you want this to go out?
That's a good question. Should we, since Christmas is coming on, should we wait till the first of the year?
Fine.
Or should we do it now?
I think we should do it now.
I think we've spoken, Dottie was going around and just kind of questioning people as to basic knowledge just
Mhm.
for a short period of time. And it's pretty surprising how ignorant, people are. They just don't. And I think about times in life when I was raising children, the last thing I was doing was looking into my community development program or but if you have something short and sweet like this, and we actually came across a gal who administers a group of parents who all communicate with each other about school things and things that have to do with parents raising school-age children. And she said that she would, post this on that. And so then anybody who wanted to get directly on the mailing list themselves could, but that she would post it on that, which would there's hundreds of people that are on this list in the area.
So is everyone?
I think we should.
So maybe the next week, let's say 1 week from now, because I need to get few more names on the list. In the next week, we post this. Anybody? Okay,
Yes.
So we need to send it, Paula needs to send it to you.
yes.
Okay. And
You
then
need-
you will,
You put it down as saved as a link. This is on Word, right?
Yes.
Paula?
It's
Yes.
Word.
It's on Word, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you want to save it, let's say the desktop, and then enclose as attachment, a letter to me.
I have a question for staff here, and that is Dottie and I are this committee because of the restriction of 2 people. So, but then when I sent out this today, because it was an attachment for this meeting, I was fortunate to have 2 people jump in and recognize Dennis made some additions because I was just going to put the original one out, and he said let's update it a little more accurately as to how it would be if we send it out today. And then 2 people came forward and pointed out some errors and some
Right.
adjustments that needed to be made. So can we send something like this out ahead of time for editing purposes before? Is that considered?
well, you already did. You sent it to everybody.
Well, I did because it was an attachment for tonight's meeting.
Right.
So
So
we-
everybody has it.
Putting it out in the newsletter, and I personally would like to send it by everybody because we all do have different areas of strength, and some people caught some things that Dottie and I and Dennis did not. Are we able to do that?
Well,
For
I
editing.
can do that for you if you want me to.
Thank-
You can send it out to everybody to review, but you cannot respond back and forth quickly. So if Dennis responds to you and then 20 minutes later, Linda responds and so on, you're okay. It just can't be quick communication back and forth because then you're constituting a meeting, which you cannot have without proper notification.
Okay, yeah, I think that Dottie would probably agree. She can speak for herself.
best way to,
But I
best
think
way-
it's for editing purposes, not for content purposes.
Well,
maybe the
I would
best way. Go
I
ahead.
would suggest that everybody got this one. You've all seen it. If you see any issues, any problems, email Dennis. But I think you've all seen it. I don't think you see any problems. For
Well,
the next,
we're talking about in the future,
in
Tony.
the future, we should time it with a meeting so we can send it to the committee for review. And then it comes up at the meeting and then we finalize it.
The other way to do it is between meetings, if you have something prepared. You send, it might be a little bit more onerous, but if you want to space out the replies, send out individual emails to committee with the link on each email. Instead of sending out a group email that everybody gets at once and no one knows when another person is going to send back a reply.
Right.
So you have spacing to send out individual emails. That way, the
But then we
chances
can't
are
see
you'll
what
get it.
everybody else is saying.
Pardon me?
Then we can't see what everybody else is
But
saying.
then if you see what everyone else is saying, then you're getting into a meeting. You can see what
It's
everyone
not
else.
helpful.
Okay,
But we're just looking for editing for this.
well, the other
Correct.
way, to do it, but Linda, the other way to do it is if we send out our responses, if
Like
you send-
content,
if you send out a response and copy everybody else in response without asking for another response, that doesn't constitute a meeting, does it? If one person sends back a response to Paula and copies everybody else with the response, not the original one, is that considered a meeting, Carolyn?
Yes, you can, but what you want to do is you can send it out to the whole committee. And each person can review it and only respond to Paula, then it's not considered a meeting. Is that,
And how does Paula get the rest of the committee to see what other people's comments are?
each person would email her, just her directly, not the full group,
Right? Now she gets all the comments and
Right.
edits,
correct?
and she wants to let everybody else on the committee know what these were. How does she do that?
You need to talk about it at the meeting that day. If you're gonna,
Okay,
if you wanna, before you send it out, do it like you're doing tonight, discuss it at the meeting with the changes that people had sent her. She made some corrections. You talk about it tonight and then you can send it out after the meeting. And one of the things you could put on your email is to check the calendar tomorrow after the next day of the, after 10 a.m. and the recording of this meeting is posted on the calendar the next day by 10 a.m. So if anybody wants to come back and watch what happened tonight, they can do it tomorrow after 10 a.m.
okay. So for instance, what happened today, two people made corrections. They were simply corrections. And the first one came in and I said, thank you. I made that correction. And then another one came in and I said, thank you. I made that correction.
I think you're okay as long as it isn't like immediate, and I would suggest not thanking, just letting people know at the meeting, thank you for your emails.
But we only meet every 2 months.
Exactly, which is another issue I'd like to talk about.
That's something that could change that's up to Tori, I guess. That's not, I'm just here to help.
so we could call a special meeting if we wanted to, why not?
Yeah, because content is one thing, and content, it would be good to speak at the open meetings and have any kind of input, whether it's residents, whether it's, office holders or office staff. I think that getting content is good. I think editing to catch mistakes and spell check is another issue. I think content could be discussed in an open meeting, but as far as just making corrections on a number or spelling, I don't think is necessary. We have to find another way than to have to discuss those things at the meeting.
Right, well, what we could do is maybe at a meeting coming up is we could have the county attorney come and talk to you all about and make it clearer than what I'm thinking, what is considered a meeting via email.
I think we already know that. I don't think we need to waste the county attorney's time personally. I think we all know that. If you have questions, email him or her.
Well, I
I
don't
would
know.
think, I'm not a lawyer, but I would think speculatively maybe. I mean, if you send out the draft of the thing to the whole committee, and the committee members get it, and if I like wait 20 minutes to respond, and Betsy waits 20 minutes to respond, and we both respond within seconds of each other, but we don't respond to each other's. We're not responding to each other's comments because we haven't gotten them yet. We're only responding to the original thing, so that's probably okay. You know,
It is,
then-
that's what they said.
Yeah, if I responded and Betsy responded to mine within 2 seconds, including my comment, that might be a problem, you know?
Yeah, right.
So I think it's okay as long as you don't rush to respond to things, you know, wait a few minutes. That's the rule.
Yeah,
It's almost like they don't want us to get any work done.
Good
No,
point.
it's state law. It's state law.
Yeah, but
Public meetings and notice, and it's so you don't have smoke-filled rooms making decisions.
Yeah,
Sorry to interrupt, but
yeah. Well,
Carolyn's description was
I
very
just wondered if
accurate.
editing, fell into a different category, but it sounds like if I send out a draft and I get a correction, someone telling me that I spelled the word wrong, that if I don't respond and I choose to make the correction or leave it uncorrected, that's not violating anything.
okay, what would happen if Paula sends her draft to me? I make my corrections, I send it to Betsy with an email saying, Betsy, these are corrections I made. When you look it over, please look it over and make your corrections, if you have them. Betsy then sends her corrections to Neil. And we keep on doing that one at a time. So only one person is communicating with another person. Then the last person on the list, send it back to Paula.
Seems like a lot of trouble. And
Yeah,
if
well, this
somebody's
whole
out,
thing
of-
is-
you know, somebody's indisposed or, you know, busy doing something else or
Well,
out
and
of town
especially,
or something, you know.
There's no easy way
Ruins the
to
whole
do this.
thing.
You know? The problem is, there's no easy way to do this.
especially because we're only looking at correcting mistakes. We're not looking at writing content. The content would be decided in a meeting. It would just be a mistake.
For this newsletter, I think we basically have it. I think that someone said put in 220 houses originally they wanted instead of 160. And I don't see anything else that has to be changed.
You talking about the one that we just
Yes.
showed you, Paula just
Yes.
showed you?
Yes, the one that you did already.
Yeah,
One-
what were the two
one-
corrections? Oh, one was that Rick Randolph was the planning commissioner. I had said we have a new planning commissioner and I was corrected that was a planning director. I put the wrong thing in, so I basically fired Rick from his job, I guess. And
He's grateful.
so I just corrected that word. And then the other, you're right, was a number. So we're not talking about any content change. It was just making it more
Right.
accurate.
Well, I asked in this meeting if anyone had any changes and I didn't hear anything.
Well, that's because you already have them. It was
I
already.
know, I mean, so this one is put to bed with change
Yes,
160 to 220 and you have it.
I noticed that Tim Novak was on the list of
Yes.
PAC members, and we said at the beginning of the meeting that he wasn't.
no, I
No.
think,
No,
probably he-
someone said, is Tim Novak's on list? I said, yes, he is. He's still a member until March.
Okay.
You were the one that suggested to me that he's still a member and I didn't include him on an email.
I know.
Okay. I think we put this one to bed. Paula, when you make those, any minor changes, send it to me and I'll get it out, okay?
Okay, and it'll be marked final. It won't be marked draft. It'll be fine. It'll say
Okay.
final.
Well, the link should, just send the link to me. I'll know it's final. I don't want to send people a link saying final. See, I'm gonna send them the link. They have to open it up.
You're
When
gonna
I
send them an
it,
attachment, right?
It's an attachment.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so what do you want
If
to?
you don't send me an attachment, then I have to copy the whole thing.
Oh,
See,
so what do you want the attachment title?
I want you to save it as an attachment and then send the attachment to me.
And what do you want the title of the attachment to be then?
Newsletter, it's fine.
And then the date, so we can tell one from two.
No,
Yes.
yeah, number one, newsletter number one.
Okay.
Collector's edition.
Okay,
Okay, so you want them numbered. Okay, and I put the date at the top. Do we want it? I just put the month and the year.
That's good. If
fine.
you put a
Yeah.
date, people aren't gonna get it on that date anyway, so that.
Yeah, I think that's what you had suggested.
Month and year is
before.
good.
okay. Are we finished with that? Any other things on it?
Well, just one thing. When do you want the second one to go out?
The second one will go out. I don't know. I think it'll be in January sometime.
Well, that's the first one. Oh, you want the second one to go out in January?
Yeah,
Okay, Paula, we need,
sometime for our next meeting.
okay, first one next week, second one maybe in January. Paula and I will get together and
Right,
put together a new one.
And
okay.
then will we have another meeting between now and then?
We're gonna have a meeting in January.
So there won't be a meeting between now and then. Okay.
No,
Good,
Yeah,
good, that'll
Paula.
work.
okay. So next topic, I've asked Tori to present presentation on middle density residential and missing middle housing. And then you can ask your questions afterward. Tori,
Yes.
all yours.
So I am going to share my screen. All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Tori Kanelopoulos, and I'm a senior planner at Albemarle County. This presentation is focused on missing middle housing in the county's middle density residential future land use category. And we will also be covering background information on land use and zoning and review data on housing costs in the county. So we'll start with an overview of future land use and zoning. And I know for a lot of CAC members, this is probably familiar content, but wanted to provide the background detail and context for attendees listening in and for anyone who may want to watch this recording later. Future land use categories are part of the county's comprehensive plan, which is a 20-year guiding document for the county, and it's required by Virginia state law. It includes recommendations for land use, housing, transportation, and public infrastructure and utilities. Future land use categories are applied to each parcel in the county and indicate the recommended future uses for each parcel. Some categories are primarily residential, some are primarily commercial or light industrial flex, and others are mixed use. Categories recommend primary uses, secondary uses, density ranges, and form and scale. They are used for legislative review applications such as rezonings and special use permits, to review for consistency with the comprehensive plan recommendations, which includes applicable master plans. And future land use categories are recommendations, they are not law. This is an example of a parcel in the Pantops development area that is designated office, research and development, flex, and light industrial. This land use category is intended to encourage employment generating uses that support the county's economic development goals. And if a rezoning application were made for this property, staff would use the criteria for this land use designation, including intent, uses, form, height, and massing, as part of the evaluation of the application for consistency with the comprehensive plan. Zoning districts are part of county code and include the permitted uses, densities, setbacks, maximum building height, and other regulations. Every parcel in the county has a zoning district, and zoning is law. It is a local ordinance. And sometimes the future land use and zoning do not align for a property. And if a property owner wants to develop their property according to the future land use and the zoning does not match, they can submit a rezoning request to change the zoning district of the property. And zoning is one of many tools for implementing the comprehensive plan. This is an example of some of the regulations from the R2 residential zoning district in the county. The full regulations are in the ordinance, but this slide shows some of the by right uses in the district and the regulations for density, minimum lot size, building height. So now we'll jump into how future land use and zoning affect housing. Future land use has the recommended housing types, density, scale, and form, and rezoning applicants refer to these categories for their properties. So if future land use categories are not updated, they may not keep up with emerging housing needs, trends, and types. Similarly, zoning districts regulate the permitted housing types and densities, and other zoning regulations affect how many units can be built and how they can be designed, such as minimum sizes, setbacks, and open space requirements. If zoning districts are not updated, they also may not keep up with emerging housing needs, trends, and types. The county's recently updated housing policy acknowledges the role that land use and zoning have in housing and includes recommendations on reducing barriers to affordable housing production, including future land use and zoning regulation barriers as outlined in strategies 8A and 8B. Missing middle housing is housing that is between single-family detached housing and larger apartment buildings and is intended to be compatible in scale and form with single-family detached houses. This includes housing types such as duplexes, multiplexes, bungalow courts, townhouses, courtyard buildings, and live-work units. These housing types tend to be more affordable as units are usually smaller than traditional large lot single-family units, and the land cost is often split between multiple units. This is a concept that has gained a lot of attention recently, though many of these housing types have existed for decades or longer and actually used to be permitted throughout many localities. Now localities are re-legalizing these units by updating their zoning ordinances. These are some examples of missing middle housing, and wanted to point out that the city of Norfolk, Virginia has a missing middle pattern book. So that has a lot of additional examples if you're interested in taking a look. It's also where this duplex example from Richmond is from. So now we'll jump into density and how the criteria for density affect housing. So density is number of units divided by number of acres, so units per acre. Focusing on density alone sometimes prohibits developments that allow for needed housing types, such as missing middle housing. Units per acre does not provide information on the form and scale of the development. For example, you could have a lower density just because there's a large area of undeveloped or open space. Density ranges do not distinguish between housing type, sizes, or cost. And future land use categories can also recommend form, scale, and housing types, which can also be regulated by zoning districts. So this is an example of density related to missing middle housing. So these two apartment buildings total 24 units and they're on 0.64 acres. So that's 37.5 units per acre. And just wanted to note that the county zoning ordinance, the highest density permitted in any district is actually 35 units per acre. So for these apartment buildings, each building footprint is about 4,000 square feet. Adjacent house building footprints in this area range from 1,800 to 3,400 square feet. And both the apartments and surrounding houses are similar in height, around 2.5 to 3 stories. So this is an example of missing middle housing on a predominantly single family street that's scaled to be similar in footprint and height. These are a few more examples of density. Focusing more on form and scale instead of density is especially important with infill development, as some of these are, where sites tend to be smaller acreages and there are usually existing housing units adjacent and nearby. So now we'll look at local housing needs and housing choice. So housing is considered affordable based on the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development definition, which is that if a household is spending 30% or less of monthly gross or pre-tax income, that it's affordable. For this includes both rent and utilities, and for homeowners, the mortgage, which includes principal, interest, and insurance, and property taxes. Many community members are unable to find market rate housing that they can afford within 30% of their income, especially those earning less than the area median income or AMI. And the current county income limit to qualify for income restricted affordable housing, either for sale or for rent, is 80% of AMI. And this table from HUD shows the local income limits for AMI. HUD uses metro areas for these income limits, and Albemarle is part of the Charlottesville HUD metro area. So for our area, the median family income is $93,700. And the bottom row of this table shows the income limits that one would need to be within 80% of AMI, which is again the limit to qualify for affordable housing in the county. So for a single person household, that's $52,500 per year. For a family of 4, it's about $75,000. And while median incomes are relatively high in this area, the cost of living is also high, especially the cost of housing. The median rent in Albemarle County increased about 20% from 2010 to 2019, from $1,031 per month to $1,231. Median home sale prices in the county increased 23% from 2010 to 2019, from $290,000 to $375,000. And the most recent quarter of this year, the median sale price in the county was about $416,000, which, as you can see on the table on the right, is higher than all of the surrounding localities. Median home values in the county are about $138,000 higher than the US median and about $83,000 higher than the Virginia median. 42% of renter households and 18% of homeowner households in the county are cost burdened, meaning they are paying more than 30% of their gross income toward housing. Other needs can be expensive locally as well, including childcare, healthcare, food, and transportation. So another way to measure cost of living and household income is the Asset Limited Income Constrained Employed, or ALICE threshold. The ALICE threshold is calibrated to the cost of living by locality, and the threshold is defined by the household survival budget, which estimates the amount of money needed for 1 year for a household to live in a particular area. For Albemarle, the 2018 household survival budget was $75,000. And approximately 37% of Albemarle households are ALICE households, and an additional 9% are below the poverty line. So a household may not qualify for affordable housing based on their income and may be above the poverty line, but market rate housing may still be out of reach for them, especially larger lot single family homes. And if you're interested in reading more about the ALICE data that we have, it's in the county's equity profile online as well. So the county housing policy says to allow, encourage, and incentivize housing choice through a variety of housing types. Increasing options for both income restricted affordable units and more affordable market rate units is important to provide more options for different households. This gives options such as aging in place as well, with different unit types that someone could move into in different stages in their life. And there are other benefits, such as smaller units tending to be more energy efficient, which is important for climate and affordability, and allowing more infill and creative designs, especially in walkable areas, can help reduce vehicle trips and miles traveled. So the middle density residential land use category is the county's newest category and covers some of the themes from this presentation. And it's an example of one tool to address affordable housing, but a variety of tools are needed. This new future land use category was developed during the Crozet Master Plan update in response to community feedback on the need for housing choice and affordability with housing types that are in scale with existing neighborhoods. Staff heard feedback on the need for housing types that are in between typical single family developments and larger apartment buildings or missing middle housing. The category recommends a density of 6 to 12 units per acre, with up to 18 units per acre by meeting middle density housing types or affordability criteria beyond baseline affordable housing requirements. It encourages housing types that are in scale with single family neighborhoods and that increase housing choice and affordability, such as small and medium multiplexes, accessory units, and cottages. The form and scale recommendations include a recommended maximum building height of 3 stories and a maximum residential building footprint of 12,000 square feet. And this is a future land use category, so it's used to evaluate rezoning applications for properties with the middle density residential land use designation. Information on the middle density residential land use category is in the land use and appendix chapters of the Crozet Master Plan. The appendix contains form and scale guidance for the different housing types that are encouraged in this district. These include many of the housing types discussed in this presentation, such as the bungalow court and small multiplex shown on this slide. And this section of the appendix is meant to act as a guide and reference for rezoning applications. That is the end of my presentation, so I will stop here and turn it over to you all for questions and discussion. Thank you.
I have a few questions, Tori. When these housing units are created and there's a certain price that people who are in this affordable category can buy, what prevents them after 5 years, if the housing market goes up, from moving, selling those at a profit, and now the next units are going to be higher in cost again? Because all these things generally over time go up in value. So when you create something that's affordable at a particular point in time, it doesn't mean 10 years later it's still going to be affordable. Especially as you've noted in your slides, housing costs are going up higher or faster than incomes.
So I'm a housing expert and don't want to say anything incorrect from our housing policy, but hopefully answer correctly. So for the rental units, there is an affordability period that's required. For the for sale units, I am not sure if there is, but there are also other methods that localities can use for that, where they can include a required affordability period for resale or use a community land trust to take the cost of the land out of it. So there are a variety of other options as well. And I see Supervisor Price has her hand raised.
Supervisor Price?
Thanks. And Dennis, thanks for the question. I think one of the points to make here is that middle density housing is not, quote, affordable housing in the sense of we have an affordable housing plan. So much housing that is more affordable. And what really struck me about this, and I'll just use my own family as an example, the aging in place aspect of it. And we had a nice 4-bedroom, 3-bath, pool, double car garage, all of that in Virginia Beach. The kids grew up and we were interested in downsizing, but staying in the same general community. And there were no options because where we lived in Virginia Beach, it was all detached single family houses on large lots. And so for us to find something that was more in the line with what we needed as an aging couple, we would have had to move miles away. And I think the slide that Tori showed on that strip of housing at the bottom is really indicative of where I see the benefit of middle density housing. It allows a single person or a young couple to move into a community. And as their incomes increase, as they mature in their jobs, as their family size increases, they can move from a smaller unit to a larger unit to the big, detached single family. And then as the kids grow and move out, they can move back into a smaller unit and not have to leave the community. And not that it is a lower quality in any respect. It just provides a variety of options. The number of older people I have seen who are struggling to stay in their large single family homes, particularly as you get to a widow or widower or something like that, they're being forced to not only sell their houses, but move to an entirely new area where they don't know anyone. So again, I would personally differentiate this from the quote affordable housing and put it more into the category of housing that may be more affordable. That may be luxury. So that, I would just add that as a consideration also.
Well, excuse me, I didn't express myself properly. I didn't mean affordable housing in terms of the formula that's used. I'm talking about housing that's affordable for working families who may be above that threshold. And what I'm saying is that, well, I had my own example. In Ohio, when we were first married, we moved into an apartment that was just built, Ohio Power Apartments. It can't remember how much it cost, maybe $125 a month, something like that. We lived there for a couple of years. I went back there 5 years later, the same apartments equal to mine, we're renting for $320 a month. So
Mhm.
the costs went way up. And so what happens is over time, real estate keeps on going up.
Mhm.
And so when you build these things with all good intentions, sooner or later, they become different neighborhoods.
Well, I wouldn't disagree with that, but just as the apartments have gone up in cost, so have the detached single families gone up in cost. I think we all pretty much anticipate, hope for that housing costs will continue to increase in the sense that if we have an investment in our home, that we will one day be able to get a positive return on that. But they should march in somewhat sequence as they increase in value.
They do, but income doesn't go up that much. Average incomes don't go up at the same rate that housing costs do. And that's always a problem. You know, so you get priced out. And these things have good intentions, but in reality, a lot of times they just, over a period of time, they just don't work. This is my concern. I mean, God, I'm no oracle. I may be wrong, but it's my experience is what I've seen. I've lived a lot of different places. Any other comments from people or questions?
I had a
I
question.
understand, I understand what Donna's saying. I mean, I look at myself right now, my house is way too big. But if I were to move to downsize something, I would have to go exactly what she's saying, probably someplace where that is not in this neighborhood. So I understand exactly what you're saying.
I just have a question. You mentioned something about some of the benefits of this, and one of them that was mentioned, I don't know if whoever added that to the concept here, that it can cause for less use of automobiles, individual automobiles, because there's greater density. I think that must not have been applied to Albemarle County in particular, maybe just because Albemarle County is spread out. I don't, that's part of the problem out here when we want to create density on a road that is overutilized, and then we don't have public transportation or any way to get, and there's nothing out here for people. So just that one comment, I kind of was curious about how, I was trying to picture how in our circumstance of our development area, it would cause less trips. I just am commenting that I don't think that applies really well to this particular area, because you have to have cars to get to anything.
Mhm.
And
Other
we don't have
comments?
buses, and we have, it's not coming down on traffic because due to our circumstance out here. That's all. Just an observation.
Any other comments?
So I guess can you hear me?
Yes.
Testing,
Yes.
testing. So I guess like some of the places at Rivanna Village are missing middle.
Right.
Or, even
Village are.
even if they're not zoned as missing middle or middle density, they're effectively, that's what they are. Some
The
of those
village are.
townhouses and stuff.
Townhouses.
Right.
Yeah,
Duplexes
the village.
and the future, the ones that'll have the alleyways behind them that are planned, those are all.
The villas were 299,000 when they were built. And I hear that some of them have been sold for more than that since then. I have a question. Maybe Rick or Donnie can answer. What specifically were the objections to the people in Crozet who objected to this missing middle? Well, I had problems understanding specifically why they were against it.
Neighborhood character,
Is that what it was?
the historic neighborhoods,
Oh,
neighborhood character. if you start doing this in historic districts, then
Yeah.
you destroy the historic district, basically, because all of a sudden you have an abundance of non-contributing housing. And there's no historic preservation ordinance.
So the problem is, if you don't put it in established districts, you put them out by themselves.
Well, in the historic district particularly, this can destroy your historic designation if too much of infill housing takes place, so that your non-contributing structures outweigh your contributing structures. I think that was
It's basically downtown.
the
or close.
basis for some of the concern about middle density there. Simply taking historic units and allowing the property around them to be developed with non-contributing units.
Thanks, Betsy.
Anything else? Okay, well, thank you, Tori, for the presentation. We appreciate it. Any old or new business that anyone would like to bring up?
New business, having more meetings more frequently,
How often do you want to have? a
although
meeting?
that's old business. I believe we had a monthly, and I felt that that kept us where meetings didn't get too long and we didn't have too many deep subjects per meeting.
Other comments? Anybody
I agree
else?
I agree with Paula. We used to
I do
have
too.
meetings every month and we'd skip maybe December because of Christmas and a few others, but basically we had meetings every month, and I think we should go back to that.
Sounds
So you
good to
don't,
me.
so you don't overload.
Right.
I'm guilty of starting that with my last term on the committee because there was nothing going on. So I switched it from 1 month every 2 months. I like your other comments, though. Neil, Linda?
Works for me. Every
What
month,
works for you? Every month.
every month.
Neil?
Sure, we can have more if there's, stuff to do.
Yep.
Tori, what's the county's position on that? Any position? Or can we have them every month?
I can look into that and double check. I think it would be fine, starting in January, but I'll confirm.
Yeah. I think it's better to have an hour meeting than ones that go an hour and a half, 2 hours.
Do other CACs have meetings every month, Tori?
They
Yeah.
and they will cancel when they don't have anything that they need to
Okay.
put on the agenda.
Okay. Okay. So everyone's in favor of asking for monthly meetings,
Yes, with the option of you canceling should there be
Right.
nothing.
right?
Yeah.
So that would be starting in January, because
January.
December is a busy month.
Right.
Okay. Any other business? Okay, I'd like to hear from our liaisons, Donna and Rick. You there?
Rick, why don't you go first?
I was going to yield to you, Supervisor. I've had my time in the sun.
And I don't know that I have much more to add. I mean, we've covered quite a bit and I added some additional commentary in there. At the present, I'm not aware of any proposals coming up in the VORCAC area at this. Have you heard of anything else that's being proposed right now?
I'd like to ask you, Donna, where do we stand in the never-ending effort to try to get the comprehensive plan for net density agree with the Albemarle County Code?
The county staff and county attorney's office are working towards both the ordinance revisions and the master plan and comprehensive plan to get more consistency. It is not easy. It is complex, and there are so many things on the work plan that it is not something that is going to be done quickly. But the discussions at the board meetings have been to work towards both of those. And I can give you a time frame on when that might be completed.
Okay. Well, I'm only 84. I got a lot more years to live, hopefully. I'll see the end of this, maybe before I'm 90. Okay, and Rick, would you like to have your day in the sun now?
The only thing that I want to do is try to address the question that I heard from one member of the committee about could middle density residential be coming to the village of Rivanna? And what I want to note is Tori's really excellent presentation. Tori, I hope you're going to make that available. You'll send out copies to all the members of the CAC. There's a lot in there to digest. I especially will recommend that members of the CAC look at the percentages of the people that are below the 50% AMI and then also in poverty. You're really looking at essentially 1 in 2 families in Albemarle County that has housing challenged, might be the best way to describe it, in terms of being able to afford where they're living, whether it be owning or more likely renting. And be mindful of the fact that this is a university community, and therefore rental costs are really driven by outsiders who coming in from urban areas look at housing rentals in Charlottesville as still being a bargain today, when all of us in this community are very sensitive to the fact of how dramatically those costs have gone up over the last decade. And until recently, Dennis's point, hourly wages were not adjusted at all to address those costs. But now the big driver for a lot of those families is, of course, the inflation costs of food and gasoline. So one set of challenges for people in poverty are replaced by others. But I want to talk about middle density residential. Tori very correctly pointed out that that arose in the discussions about the new master plan for Crozet. And it is something that both the Planning Commission and the board felt very strongly is a housing option that should be included. Now, the issue that I heard from a member of this committee was, could middle density residential be coming to the village of Rivanna? Let me point out that that kind of housing density is really geared to much more of an urban setting, i.e., where there's going to be pedestrian and bicycle connectivity. No one in their right mind would attempt to ride a bicycle on 250 in normal working hours between Running Deer and then the end, the western end of the village of Rivanna, which we'll put at Milton Road intersection there where Clifton is. And there certainly isn't any pedestrian connectivity, and there's nothing that was proposed for Breezy Hill to enable people to connect westward. As you well know, in the final plan, that was not a requirement by the board for connectivity. So, you know, this is not going to be an issue there. Middle density residential is also designed to have access to parks, amenities, and a green system. There's a very limited green system that exists there along where Carroll Creek is on the western end of Breezy Hill. And there is only one park, and that's in Havana Village. But how do you get there? You're going to have to cross Carroll Creek. And there are times of the year where we well know that Carroll Creek is swollen with runoff from the north and now from the new development around it, both east and west. So that's not going to be really realistic. The third thing is that the housing types associated with middle density residential, again, which is what Tori presented, those are designed to be additional units to existing housing. So accessory dwelling units, cottages, these bungalows, these kinds of concepts were designed to add density without necessarily changing existing structures. And we don't have that kind of housing available either on the east side of the village of Rivanna or on the west side of the village of Rivanna. So I don't really see a snowball's chance in hell that there's going to be middle density residential coming into the village of Rivanna in the near future. The only time period that might arise, let me turn this off. The only time period that might arise is probably when, as Supervisor McKeel likes to say, most of the members of this committee will be pushing up daisies. So that's all I have to add. I just wanted to embellish on what Tori presented as an excellent summary of housing and middle density.
I'd like to ask a question. Has the county considered in promoting middle density housing, some sort of scaled tax abatement, property tax abatement, not I don't mean abatement, but scaled reduced taxes from year 1 up to year 10 for owners of these homes or for builders who build these apartment buildings, so that on the provision they pass those reduced costs on to people occupying these units?
I'm not, Rick, you're muted.
You're
Dennis,
muted.
who are you posing the question to?
Either one of you.
Well, I will have to yield to the supervisor because this involves financial issues that are beyond my pay grade as a planning commissioner.
I don't recall that specifically being raised at this point. It's still a relatively new concept, the middle density housing. I don't recall that having been brought up.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying if the county is very cognizant of the need for affordable housing and upward, has the county considered chipping in, so to speak, with reduced taxes, property taxes as an incentive for builders to build those type of units, scaled up. So the first year you'd have more of a reduction, the second year less, until after 10 years, so to speak. If the builder would then pass those reduced costs down to renters, for example.
I think what you're talking about, Dennis, is could a builder get a bonus for including affordable housing units? And Tori and Donna, correct me if I'm wrong, that is part of the new affordable housing policy to try to provide those kind of bonuses. But what you're really talking about sounds almost like a TIF, which is where the county through the state would be putting money in for the construction of affordable housing. And then there is a reduction in costs for the developer over a designated time period up to 10 years, I believe, under the TIF program. But that's very different where there's lower income housing and people have to qualify for that housing through the state program. So that's a different ball of wax. I think what you're doing is mixing TIF together with bonus density housing for affordability.
No, I'm simply saying, a guy builds an apartment house. He has 30 units in it. He pays property taxes on that apartment house. He doesn't receive any assistance in the construction of that apartment house. But as long as he owns the apartment house, he's going to have to continue to pay property tax. So you give him reduced property taxes scaled upward for 10 years. And he passes that reduction down to renters.
I think the problem there is how can you guarantee that the renters are going to actually realize the reduction in the property taxes? So anyhow, that's an issue for probably another day. I don't want
Okay.
us to get on dancing on the head of the pin here on a fairly complex financial question and a legal question.
Yeah, and I can't avoid throwing in a little humor. If we did that and called it the tax abatement treatment TAP, we could then talk about stuff for that. But but Dennis, actually, that is a question that I have been thinking about in slightly different context, and that is that frequently government entities will provide a tax reduction for certain individuals, 100% disabled military veterans,
Yes.
survivors of first responders who have died in the line of duty. And I'm not necessarily opposed to that. That tends to go to a property owner. Not everyone is a property owner. And I am equally concerned with the situation of those same individuals in a rental situation rather than a homestead situation. And, Rick and Commissioner Randolph just raised one of the questions, and I think, Dennis, you were also commenting upon it, and that is, how do we ensure that that is actually, that benefit, if there's a tax reduction, is actually provided to a tenant? That then a supervision / enforcement arm, and that would then ultimately, I think, there would be increased expenses to the county, because we would then have to hire staff and establish some sort of a monitoring system to make sure that that reduction actually was received by the tenant. And it's a complexity that I think is more difficult than on a property owner as an individual. Not to say no, but it's, as Commissioner Randolph said, perhaps a better discussion for another time.
Okay, good. So our next meeting is tentatively scheduled for Monday, January 10th. Opportunities to the public to access and participate in the electronic meeting would be posted at a later date in accordance with Emergency Ordinance 20-A16 and open meeting requirements of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. Do I receive a motion to adjourn? If there's no other.
Before you do that, since that date is set, January 10th, Paula and I will email all of you folks the draft of the next newsletter, and then we can come together at the meeting and discuss it.
Okay, fine. That's good. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I so move.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
The meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.
Night, everyone.
Thank you, Dennis.
Aye.